Good afternoon and welcome to Meeting the Challenges of Sustainable Medical Product Development. My name is Alastair Willoughby. I head up the Mechanical Engineering Group at Team Consulting, as well as having a focus in sustainability and sustainability engineering. My career has spanned both consulting and contract manufacturing organisations, focused on novel technologies and looking at the challenges of moving ideas from reality to production. So, what is sustainability and why is it important? In the medical device industry, we are making life-changing and life-enhancing products, but we also need to be aware of the impact that they have on the environment. As many of you are aware, the healthcare system globally is a huge producer of greenhouse gases, something around 5 to 10%, depending on which numbers you have, of global greenhouse emissions are attributed to healthcare systems. We're going to focus mainly on sustainability engineering, as we would term it, focused on the product development process and how to develop more sustainable products. But as a company, we also link this into broader aspects of sustainability, so sustainable development goals and the more broad socio-economic side of sustainability. So, who wants to improve sustainability? I'd like to touch on 4 groups of people that I believe are all keen to improve the sustainability of medical devices. So first of all, industry. I'm going to talk a lot to pharma companies and drug delivery space, but the same applies across diagnostics and surgical and other medtech spaces. Many of the pharma companies have targets which are very ambitious to reduce their carbon footprints. But as businesses, they also have to grow. And that's a real challenge, to be able to decrease your footprint, baselined at some point in the past, release new products, grow, thrive as a business, but also reduce your footprint. And that relies on their existing suppliers making cuts, and also new devices and new ways of operating, enabling significant reductions in their CO2 footprint. We also have the fact that payers, for example, the NHS in the UK, are putting in place requirements for lower carbon options. All large-scale procurement by the NHS now has to look at the carbon reduction plan of those organisations which are involved. And similar goals will be coming into play in the US as insurance companies start to be more militant, and large procurement organisations through hospitals are also looking to buy more sustainable products. Users. While users don't always have a huge choice in the matter, many users do feel uncomfortable about some of the products. And in the UK, there's been a long-running discussion in the media about the benefits of PMDI inhalers and dry powder inhalers. Many people understand that dry powder inhaler is better because it doesn't include the hydrofluoroalkane gas, but they don't really understand the full story or the challenges of those devices and the fact that they may use more plastic or be less recyclable. So people are incentivized, people do want to make the world a better place and do the right thing, but they don't always have the data available to make those choices. Finally, regulators. There are lots of regulations around the world pushing sustainability, but they're not always very joined up, and it's not always clear what the impact will be or when. So sometimes this has adverse effects on organisations' ability to innovate and develop because they're too busy dealing with retrospective legislation that means that chemicals they're using are no longer allowed. Or we rush to a solution which in the long term may seem short-sighted. Classic example for me is the move to ban CFCs in inhalers, which resulted in people moving to use HFAs, which they're now having to replace because the HFAs are, in some cases, thousands of times worse than CO2 for carbon footprint. So having established that there's many people within the space of the medtech industry that want to do the right thing, I'd like to touch on a few trends. Firstly, some good trends that I see in creating more sustainable products, but then also some more troubling ones. So, good trends. moving care into the home has been a key topic for many years, which has huge impacts in terms of reducing travel to the clinic and space in the hospital, which can be fantastically powerful in terms of cutting down on associated emissions. However, you do still need to move the drug around or the product that's being used. And actually people still need to go and collect that. And it may be less efficient to have a number of patients driving to and from a pharmacy to collect something than it all being in one centralised location. Increased focus on usability. Usability is a really key thing in so many aspects of medical devices. Improving adherence, improving efficiency are all great things, but it can also drive us towards more complicated devices with more material usage and larger sizes, which all have adverse effects. Smart devices, digitalisation. Those data collection systems are fantastic in terms of offering patient support and education. They can help make trials smarter. They can make users more aware of their treatment, help with adherence, monitor ongoing conditions. They're phenomenally useful. But we also have to think about the fact that that involves having a digital device attached or collecting that, which may add a footprint. Running servers is not free. We've also got goals within industry. I mentioned on the previous slide about pharma companies having goals for net zero, and those are really helpful in terms of driving not just those companies, but all of their suppliers, scope 2, scope 3 elements towards zero. Finally, a really important one for me is the fact that people are taking a sensible approach in targeting the worst areas of the healthcare system. So an example for that is the UK, the NHS, looking at anaesthesia, which is a huge source of CO2 for them, and how can they reduce that, moving to alternatives such as injected anaesthesia or collecting the waste and avoiding the release of polluting gases. So having those targets, focusing on the worst areas, is really helping people make a measurable improvement. So now a couple of troubling trends, as I would call them, that help highlight some of the challenges that we have in developing sustainable products. So the first one, increasing use of complex single-use devices. So years ago, you got your drug in a pre-filled syringe, you didn't think anything of it. People have moved towards more complicated auto-injectors, as an example, where you've got more components, more difficult to dispose of, higher carbon footprint. Now that's been done for many good reasons. It helps more people access those drugs, provides a better user experience, but that complexity does come at a cost, and we haven't always acknowledged that when we're choosing to go down those routes. The time to reach markets for products has gone up year on year. It's getting longer, particularly in the world of drug delivery with combination products, where you could be looking at 3, 7, 10 years even between starting development of a product and it getting to market. And those products are going to be around for a long time. And we don't know how the market is going to look in 10, 15 years' time, what materials will be available, and how we can necessarily always design the best product for the future. Finally, regulatory and procurement changes. These can be a real force for good, as I mentioned before, driving us towards achieving excellence across a wide range of measures. We've seen that for safety, we've seen that for usability. We haven't yet seen that for sustainability. And those regulatory changes can be a force for good, but they can also add to confusion and give people an excuse to not do anything because they're waiting for that regulatory push. An example of this is recycled versus virgin polymer and what counts as recycled. This is a hugely complicated topic that impacts how we design products, how we reprocess them, and is a huge burden on device development companies. So the question now is, what are the challenges in developing sustainable products? And I've listed out a number here that I think are really critical to overcome to make sustainable products. So the first one is, what are we trying to achieve and what concessions are we willing to make? Within the medical device industry, there are many regulations and requirements that we need to make, which limits the concessions that we can potentially make. So we have to think about how we can trade those off and what we're willing to sacrifice to achieve sustainability, which is a difficult challenge. Data-driven decisions. Within the medical space, some of the data may be available. Some standard materials are used across the world. There will be good data to allow us to understand the impact of choosing them. But other aspects of medical manufacturing may be much less apparent, and the impact of those, as we'll see on some of the later slides, can be much greater than the easy to quantify ones. We also need to consider whether or not we are purely data-driven or whether we need to look at the emotional aspect of a device. We could design a device which is significantly less impactful than others, but if user perception is against it, then we may lose out in the market space. Where can we focus our decisions and how much can we really influence? So as a device designer, you feel like you're master of the universe, you can design whatever you like. But actually, when you look at it, the device in the context of the overall supply chain, the logistics flow around the world, we may not be actually able to influence that much. And we may need to also accept that we do our little bit and everyone around us also has to do that. We can't solve the problem on our own. Finally, we've already talked about some of the challenges with changing regulation and changing perception. How do we adapt to a future market that we don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years? Things that are considered acceptable now may not be acceptable. Things that are unusual now may become the norm. One area that may change radically is recycling. We look at how we recycle things today, and it's changed since what we did 10, 15, 20 years ago. And those changes will only continue to accelerate. So here at Team, we aim to consider sustainability throughout the development cycle. So all the way from front-end innovation, where, as we were just talking about, some of those goals, the strategy, the benchmarking that allows us to develop those ideas, all the way through concept generation, proof of principle, detailed design, where we can add more layers of data, drive those decisions through that data analysis, and make those really good choices that result in as sustainable a product as possible being available. One aspect of developing the product has to be choosing the right approach from the very beginning. And it's very easy to jump into following the same approaches that people have followed before. We talked about single-use disposable devices. Producing a single-use auto-injector may enable some benefits for the user, may enable some benefits for the drug, but that business model is always going to result in a carbon footprint associated with that single-use complicated device. So this view here looks at how, as an innovator, we have to choose the right approach, both for the product, but also the business model and the ecosystem that sits in. We cannot ignore the wider ecosystem that we sit in, whether that comes to circularity and the ability to bring materials back, whether it's the wider ecosystem of other companies operating in that environment, or regulations. We also need to look at our business model. Is our business model best served by producing a single-use device, or can we turn it into a service? Can we help people be more sustainable in how they use our products? One of the things that we've utilised a lot is a number of different stimuli to help us look at alternative options. And this image is from a series of cards that we've been using, the source down at the bottom, which have been really helpful in making us think about some of the other ways to approach problem solving rather than just following where others have gone before. One of our most useful tools is life cycle analysis. This is a set of industry standard approaches that we utilise in the development of sustainable products. It allows us to characterize and understand the carbon footprint of the devices that we're developing. And we do that through using industry standard databases combined with our knowledge of specific areas and of the manufacturing and assembly processes of medical devices. Now, life cycle analysis is a really fantastic tool, but like all tools, it has to be used appropriately. And one of the challenges with it is making sure that you are asking the right question and looking at the right scope of analysis. So, for example, on this device here, which is a connected auto-injector, we can see that almost a third of the overall carbon footprint, even with electronics in it, comes from the supply chain, so shipping product around the world. Some of that's the product, some of that's the packaging, but supply chain is a huge, huge impact. Going back to some of the challenges on the previous slide, we talked about the fact that we can only improve things so much. So we can design a product to minimize the number of components, minimize the mass of those, use lower impact polymers. But if the supply chain and logistics functions then end up shipping it 3/4 of the way around the world by plane, that can counteract all of those benefits. So while it's useful, we need to make sure we're including everything. And if we include something, it will influence our decisions. If we don't include it, we can't understand it. So we need to make sure that we work cross-functionally to get a holistic view of the overall areas of impact of the product. So I'd just like to finally touch on a few areas for consideration when we're designing our products. This again uses the circular innovation ecosystem model, where on the right hand side you can see that we can look at the circular economy of a truly sustainable product by saying making something in a clean way, using less material, using it for longer, using it again wherever possible, and then regenerating it is the ideal that we're aiming for. So as we're going through our device design, we should be considering, can we design it in such a way that people can use it for longer, a reusable device rather than a single-use device? Can we design it so it can be used again, maybe refurbished or repurposed in some way? Can we choose materials that are lower impact, we can make cleanly with them, but also crucially design them such that they can be used again as easily as possible? A really great example of this would be avoiding the use of additives in polymers. This just allows those polymers to be reused more easily than something that's heavily laden with carbon fibre or silicon agents. Packaging. We should make sure that that is, firstly, made as cleanly as possible. We're all familiar with recycled packaging coming through our doors every day, but can we use less of it as well? Can we minimise the amount of packaging that people are using while also giving them a great user experience? The supply chain, can we think about that supply chain early on? We can't solve all of it, but we can design it so that we can minimise the amount of packaging material that needs to be shipped around. Design products so they can be assembled and then easily finished. Volumes and manufacturing routes. We need to think about how our products are going to be made. Can we design them in a way that is efficient and makes use of local resources? Whether that's energy, whether that's polymer, whether that's just making it closer to our primary market so that we can avoid huge complex shipping operations. So again, the use of tools like this that make us think about the different elements of the use of a device, the life of a device, can be really helpful to ground us as we go through the design process. So finally, in conclusion, I think we can all agree that sustainability is fast becoming a key selection criteria for medical technologies, both if you're a company looking to acquire a technology, if you're a payer or a user looking to use a technology. Everybody is becoming more and more aware of it, and I believe that that trend is going to continue. We need to consider the wider ecosystem we operate in. We do not operate in isolation, whether that's our competitors, our collaborators, our payers, or the regulators we work with. We need to consider all of those influences on the development process. Similarly, we need to consider sustainability from the start. Sustainability is not something that you can really apply at the end. You might be able to do a bit of greenwashing, change some of your materials to something that sounds a little bit greener, but really you need to design it in from the start. And finally, we need to be open to new ideas. We need to look at what's happening across other industries, and we need to reconsider some of our fundamental approaches to medical device development. Thank you.
Alastair, someone has asked, do you consider the device or component packaging within the development cycle as this forms a key part of the carbon footprint?
I think the very short answer to that is yes. I think on one of the previous slides we showed an LCA example where we looked at packaging as part of that. I think the slightly more expanded answer on that would be there are multiple different forms of packaging that are used at different points. It's very easy to get focused on the end user packaging that somebody sees, and going back to the kind of data versus emotion bit, that is the bit that end users see and often kind of go, oh my goodness, there's all this packaging sat in my waste recycling. But we also make sure that we look at all the transit packaging that's used for component movements within factories, between factories. For example, pre-filled syringe tubs. Everybody, I think, is now aware that those are quite a significant source of carbon footprint if they're not recycled appropriately. So yes, we look at all of those elements as we do our analysis, but I think it's also helps drive us towards better solutions to products. So for example, an auto injector is often shipped as two sub-assemblies to a final assembly place where the syringe is dropped in and the elements clipped together. Also some inhalers and other products have similar life cycles. But that's purely a function of the fact that they were designed so that they were in two separate halves. And redesigning it or designing it from the start such that actually they're in a more compact format cuts down on the volume of shipping that you're having to do, but also cuts down on the number of different trays and packaging materials that are needed for that shipping. So we do consider it in our analysis, and we consider it in our design process how we can minimize and eliminate that.
Excellent. Thanks, Alastair. So another question we've had is, which life cycle stage has the greatest environmental impact and should therefore be the focus for products during LCM?
Well, this is a really interesting question, and I've for several years I would like to kind of do some analysis, but haven't got around to it on the cost of developing a new product, because again, going back to the discussion around LCA, the environmental impact depends on how you measure it and what scope you put around it. And I would say, from a sort of very simplistic point of view, you would say, well, it's once the product's in high volume manufacture, you've got lots of people using your drug, has a huge, the highest impact. However, I don't think we should underestimate the years and years of development that go into it, the carbon footprint of people like ourselves, working in a building, drug development programs, and also, in the way that we do with money, all of the programs that don't make it to market and how that impacts the products that have got to market. For products that are in life cycle management, so I'm assuming by that we mean stuff that's already on the market and we're trying to improve it. I think the areas that have the greatest impact is probably going to be things like how you manufacture and how you ship it. And the shipping is probably one of those areas where you may well be able to make changes. If you're in LCM, obviously you've got limited levers that you can pull on to improve things. So I would say thinking about packaging and optimizing those elements, which is a nice segue, I would say, to the fact that really a lot of what falls under the umbrella of sustainability is also just good design for cost. We shouldn't be shipping stuff around that we don't need to. We should be minimizing the materials, all of those good things that, design for X would cover, also give us sustainability wins in many cases.
Excellent, thank you. So another question we have is, does manufacturing and transport have more impact on the product's carbon footprint than the device plastic material?
I would, again, my simple answer is yes. I think if we go back to that slide showing the LCA in general, I would say it does. I think there would probably be cases where if you had a very simple, short, efficient supply chain, the transport costs may be very low. Manufacturing costs or footprint may be low if you have a very simple device, if you're running it on purely green energy. So there may be cases where it leans away, but I would say that the manufacturing and transport are really huge contributors to that, particularly in situations where we're using air freight or cold chain to ship products after filling.
So another question that's just come in. Someone has asked, there's been a lot of focus from the NHS on ECO2 and reducing carbon footprints. They've said they're curious about when you might consider other sustainability attributes, such as reducing plastic use and waste consumption of scarce resources as a priority above carbon footprints.
Yeah, so it is interesting. Everybody does tend to focus on that one metric. In the various packages that we use for doing analysis, there are many other metrics. So we can look at the waste polymer that's used, and various other metrics of environmental damage. I think in general, people are sort of defaulting towards CO2 as a equivalent measure for many other factors. And I know that the way our analysis package works is you can kind of turn everything into an equivalent CO2 footprint. I think some of the other measures, plastic usage or volume of product, are helpful, but can also be slightly misleading at times. So one example is, well, we need to use less plastic. We want to minimize our plastic waste. So you make it out of metal. That doesn't actually drive necessarily the right behaviors. So I think with all of these metrics, you need to apply them in a smart way and consider really whether or not you're measuring the right thing.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So we probably have time for one last question. Somebody has asked, they're interested in our thoughts on how human factors testing can contribute to sustainability considerations, including things such as study material and the design of the study.
So I think there's two sides to this question. The first one is kind of touches on a general theme of how can you make the development process as sustainable as possible. So not so much about the finished product, but how can the activities that we do optimize for minimum wastage, etc. And I think, smart design of your human factors testing can help with that. So the examples of study material, study design, you can design it so you're using fewer devices, more reusable devices, avoiding traveling as much as you might do otherwise. We've done some great work over the last few years, particularly during COVID, with remote studies, looking at ways to just minimize the impact of that. So I think there's an aspect of being more sustainable in how you perform your human factors testing. But I think there's also the side of using the human factors testing to help you design a product that enables a sustainable product. So ensuring that it can be circular economy, so helping people have a product that they want to keep and reuse if appropriate, but also helping them recycle it and looking at the behavioral aspects of encouraging people to do that, which we can learn from some of that testing. So I think it is vital that we engage with the users through the whole process, and human factors testing is a key part of that.